Mira had always loved him. Kian's song, the rising star of the K-pop world. His voice was melodic, smooth, and rich. His smile, as if crafted by the gods themselves, lit up every stage he graced. Mira had been a fan since his debut. His every movement, every note he sang, left an indelible mark on her heart. She wasn't just another fan in the crowd. No, she believed she was different. She was special. She was the one who truly understood him. She collected everything Kian had ever touched: albums, posters, concert tickets. Her apartment was a shrine, a curated collection of his career, from his earliest days as a trainee to his present success. But the thing that had caught her most was his gaze. When Kian performed, his eyes would lock with hers, and in that brief moment, it was as if time stopped. She imagined that in those fleeting seconds, he could feel her presence. Maybe not in the way she felt it, but it didn't matter. What mattered was that he noticed her. The fans in the crowd screamed, shouted, waved light sticks. But Kian, when his gaze fell upon her, she was certain that it lingered a moment longer than necessary. It was as if there was something more. She wasn't just part of the crowd. She mattered to him. It was a cold Friday evening when she saw the tweet. Kian's agency had announced that they were holding a small exclusive fan meeting for a select group of fans. To win an invitation, you had to engage in the company's social media contest, a raffle that would select only the most dedicated fans. Mira's heart leaped in her chest. This was her chance, her moment. She stayed up all night, entering every possible form of the contest, tagging Kian's official fan pages, reposting, commenting, and sharing every possible post related to the contest. Sleep-deprived and dizzy, she finally received the notification. She was one of the lucky winners. She would meet Kian. Her hands shook with excitement as she reread the email. The details were vague. Just a time, a location in Seoul, and a note about special instructions. It didn't matter. She would meet him, face to face. The day arrived faster than she could prepare for it. Mira spent hours perfecting her outfit, styling her hair, and carefully choosing the gift she would give him, a small, handcrafted music box she had spent weeks designing. She wanted to give him something personal. Something that said, "I understand you." The fan meeting was held in a nondescript building, away from the bustling crowds. Mira arrived early, her heart pounding in her chest as she waited for the doors to open. Fans trickled in, all of them talking excitedly. But Mira stayed quiet, her eyes focused on the entrance, waiting for Kian to appear. When he finally stepped into the room, everything else faded away. He was even more beautiful in person. His presence was magnetic, his smile brighter than she had ever imagined. He walked down the aisle between the rows of fans, his eyes scanning the room, stopping briefly as he looked into Mira's eyes. It was brief, a passing moment, but for Mira, it felt like an eternity. The fan meeting was everything Mira had imagined. Kian answered questions, joked with the crowd, and took pictures with fans. Each time he smiled or laughed, Mira felt a part of her heart soften. This was it. This was the moment she had been waiting for. When it was her turn to meet him, she stepped forward, trembling with anticipation. The distance between them felt like an eternity. As Kian extended his hand, she placed the music box in his palm. He looked at it with a small frown, then up at her with a raised eyebrow. "You made this?" he asked, his voice smooth and warm. Mira nodded, her breath catching. "It's for you," she said softly. I thought you might like it." He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Thank you. I'll keep it safe." Her heart raced as he took a photo with her. He stood too close, his hand resting on her shoulder. The photo was taken, but for Mira, time seemed to stand still. For a brief moment, she thought she saw something in his eyes. A flicker. Recognition. As if Kian was seeing her for the first time. It was nothing, she told herself. He was just being kind. But as she left the room, a strange unease began to coil in her stomach. The fan meeting ended, but Mira's obsession with Kian only deepened. That night, she replayed the moments in her mind. His smile, his touch. There was no doubt in her mind now. She was different from the others. He had noticed her. And even though it was brief, he had remembered her. Days passed and Mira found herself obsessively searching for anything related to Kian. Videos, photos, fan interactions. But then one night she found something odd. It was a simple message on his fan page. "Thank you for the beautiful gift. I've been thinking about it all day." It was from Kian. But the message wasn't meant for the public. It was a private post, one directed solely at her. Her fingers shook as she typed a response. "I'm glad you liked it. I made it with you in mind." She hit send, not expecting a reply. But to her surprise, Kian responded almost immediately. "Come to the studio tomorrow night. I'll be waiting." Her heart raced. This couldn't be real. The next day, Mira followed the instructions in the message. She arrived at the studio just as nightfall set in, her breath visible in the cold air. The lights in the building were dim, and there were no signs of anyone else. Mira hesitated for a moment, but then pressed the doorbell. The door opened almost immediately. There, standing in the dim light, was Kian. His eyes were cold, but they lingered on her, unblinking. "You came," he said, voice soft but unmistakably sharp. "Good. Come inside." Mira's heart pounded as she stepped into the darkened hallway of the studio. The air was thick with the scent of incense and old leather. Kian led her down a narrow corridor, past empty rooms filled with sound equipment and recording instruments. "Do you like it here?" he asked, his voice distant, like he was testing her. "I do," Mira said, struggling to steady her voice. "I love your music. I feel connected to you, more than I can explain." He nodded slowly, his gaze never leaving her face. They reached a small, dimly lit room. A large window on one wall overlooked the city below. The entire space was eerily quiet, except for the soft hum of machines in the background. "Sit," Kian said, gesturing to a chair at the center of the room. Mira obeyed, her body trembling. Kian closed the door behind them. "You know, Mira," he began, his voice suddenly colder, more deliberate. "You're not like the other fans. They scream, they shout, they beg for my attention. But you've always been different. You've watched, haven't you? From the shadows, in silence, in silence." Mira's throat tightened. I don't understand." His eyes glinted with something dark. "You gave me the gift, the music box. It's beautiful. But you've been watching me, not just through the camera, but through everything." Mira recoiled, her hands shaking. She had been too careful, too hidden. How did he know? Kian stepped closer, his voice soft but filled with a chilling certainty. You think I didn't notice? That I didn't feel your gaze on me all this time? You've been the one who watches me from the shadows. But now I want to see you, Mira. All of you. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small black device. A camera. Mira's heart stopped. You wanted to be close to me, didn't you? You wanted to know me. But now I'm going to show you something. He pressed a button, and the room's lights flickered. Images appeared on the screen, one after another. Video clips of Mira from her apartment, watching him through the camera. The recordings were crystal clear. Her body froze in horror. He had been watching her. You've been following me for so long, Kian whispered, his voice almost a lullaby. But now you're mine. You belong to me, just like all the others. The room felt suffocating. The images on the screen were of her quiet moments, her obsessive gaze. And then the message became clear. He was not the one being watched. He had always been the watcher. Suddenly, Mira realized with a sickening twist in her stomach that she had become part of his collection, his private world. The door slammed shut behind her. Kian stepped forward, his eyes glinting with malice. You wanted me. You watched me. Now you're here, and you will never leave. Mira's pulse pounded as she backed into the corner of the room. What do you mean? You can't do this to me. Kian smiled darkly. The game's over, Mira. You're not the first one to fall into my trap, but you're the one who watched the longest. He stepped closer, and this time, his voice dropped to a whisper. And now, you will always be here. I never thought I'd dig through Craigslist for work. Not because I was too good for it, but because Craigslist had a smell to it. Like rot under floorboards. Scams, setups, people lured into places they never walked out of. But hunger strips away pride. It was 4 weeks after I got laid off from my receptionist job at a veterinary clinic. They said, budget cuts. I'd been living alone in a crumbling studio on the south end of Glendale, scraping by with leftovers and counting change. Rent was coming fast, and my bank account felt like a noose. When the panic got bad enough, I texted my friend, Ria. She always knew side hustles, flipping furniture, dog sitting, stuff under the table. She told me she'd babysat through Craigslist before. Check everything, she warned. Sometimes those ads aren't for kids. Sometimes it's bait. I babysat back in school and thought I could handle it.
Before.
Kids, cartoons, bedtime. How hard could it be? Most of the postings felt wrong. Broken sentences, bad grammar, too much money for too little work. Then I found one that looked clean. Need sitter this Saturday. 2 girls, 5 and 8, 6 p.m. to midnight. We're easygoing. $140 cash. Message for details. Thanks, Dana K. It was tidy, casual, safe. Dana messaged back quick, gave me the address, and said her husband would be home but leaving soon. She sounded normal, even kind. A smiley face at the end of her note. I checked the address, 71 Willow Bend, a dead-end street tucked near the old rail yard. Run down but not abandoned. I sent Rhea the details just in case. Text me when you're in, she said. And if the vibe's wrong, walk out. Don't explain, don't apologize. The night came cold and windy. I pulled up at 5:50. The house was a squat brick thing, windows black, paint peeling from the shutters. A porch swing creaked in the wind. The light above the door flickered like it was dying. Something in me hesitated, but I knocked. It opened after a long silence. A man stood there, early 60s, tall and skeletal. His skin was pale, stretched too tight, eyes sunk into dark hollows. His clothes hung loose, jeans spattered with something dark, a shirt with holes at the collar. He smiled, but it never reached his eyes. "You the sitter?" His voice was dry, like dust in a throat. "Yeah, Dana said to be here at 6. He muttered, rubbing his jaw. "She just ran out with the girls. Should be back soon. Come on in." I hesitated, but stepped inside. The smell hit me first. Metallic, sour, mixed with bleach. The living room was stripped bare, just a stained couch and old newspapers stacked high. No toys. No shoes by the door. Ha! No sign of kids ever living here. He shut the door with a click that sounded louder than it should have. "You can wait in the den," he said, pointing down a shadowed hallway. I sat on the couch instead, forcing a smile. My phone buzzed. Rhea. "You good?" I typed back strange. "No kids here yet. Husband only." The man paced the hall, muttering to himself. Every few minutes he peeked in at me, eyes darting, lips moving like he was rehearsing lines. "She should be back by now," he said more than once. At 6:20, I stood. My skin was crawling. "Maybe I'll just reschedule," I said lightly. He stiffened. His voice cracked into something sharper. "No, she's here. She's downstairs." He gestured toward a door in the kitchen, half hidden behind a curtain. The handle was rusted, paint chipped. "She takes the girls down there sometimes. Games, crafts. Go on. She's waiting." The house had gone too quiet. I walked to the door, heart slamming, and opened it. A breath of air rolled up from the dark below, damp earth, rot and copper. My stomach turned. "Go on," he said again. His smile stretched too wide now, gums raw and teeth stained red. I froze. Behind me, the floor creaked. Something moved down in the dark, heavy, dragging, wet. A low moan echoed up, followed by a sound like claws scratching wood. I stepped back fast. "Actually, my ride's here. Sorry. I need to." The front door was locked. My fingers slipped on the bolt as he whispered behind me. "You haven't even seen them yet." The sound from the basement grew louder. Not children. Not human. The stench of blood thickened in the air. The lock finally gave. I flung the door open and ran, his laughter chasing me out onto the porch. I didn't look back until I was in my car. He stood in the doorway, smiling with his ruined mouth, while something thrashed in the dark behind him. I drove until my lungs burned, parked in a gas station lot, called Rhea, sobbing. She told me to call the cops. I did. Gave the report, gave the address. They said I'd check. 2 weeks later, I got a text from an unknown number. "Hi there. Saw your babysitting profile. 2 kids, easy night. $140 cash. Let us know if you're free. Dana K." Same words. Same bait. Different number. I blocked it. More messages came. New numbers each time. Now, when I scroll job boards, I still see them. Same phrasing, same pay, different names. And I wonder how many others went inside, how many went down the basement stairs, and how many never came back. Julie is a 21-year-old woman living in San Francisco, a college graduate with a good degree but struggling with a low-paying office job at a small consulting firm. She is smart, ambitious, but weighed down by financial burdens, tuition debt, supporting her family. The dream of a university lecture hall in Canada, of white snow and a bright future, seems too far away. The burden of tuition debt and the desire to support her parents makes her feel suffocated. She realizes that with her current salary, that dream will always be just a dream. That night, in her small bedroom, Julie surfs the internet and stumbles upon articles about girls earning thousands of dollars a month from OnlyFans. At first, she brushes it off, feeling it is not suitable for her. But then, the images of bills, debt figures, and worried faces of her parents appear again. After a fierce internal struggle, she took a deep breath and made a decision. It's just temporary, she told herself. Just enough money to support my dream. I'll have it under control. She carefully created an account under the name Julien, filmed a short introductory video with a somewhat forced smile, and posted her first photos, which were still quite discreet. The first notifications of subscribers and small tips made Julie both happy and nervous. After a few weeks, she had a steady following, paying $10 a month. Gradually, she grew bolder, posting more daring content as requested. The money in her account grew, and the Canadian dream seemed a little closer. She promised herself that all of this money would go toward her education, and when she had enough, she would stop. Julie's life now alternates between two worlds, the dull office worker by day and the charming Julien online by night. One day, she attends a business conference at a fancy coffee shop. She feels out of place among the men in suits, the talk of contracts and profits. She smiles, handing over dozens of business cards with her full name, company, and, unfortunately, her home address, an odd requirement of the company to establish trust. That evening, Julie receives a notification that a new subscriber named John Smith has registered. He immediately texts her. The conversation starts out normal, even humorous. But then the questions become more personal. Do you have a dog? Are you dating anyone? Do you live with your parents? Julie, still naive and thinking that this was just a fan's way of getting to know her, answered all of them without thinking. Little did she know that each of her answers was providing the anonymous person with valuable information. After learning that she lived alone, because she said her roommate was away on a business trip, John Smith started making more daring requests in exchange for generous tips. One odd request was for a photo of her feet, then friend request on Instagram for $10. Julie hesitated, but the money was too tempting. She thought, it's just a friend request. What's the big deal? Julie accepted the friend request. She went to John Smith's profile and saw that it was completely blank. No posts, no followers. But there was an orange circle glowing around his profile picture, signaling a new story. Her heart skipped a beat. She clicked on it. The first story was a short video of her house from a distance, in the woods across the street, posted 2 hours ago. Julie shivered. It must be a coincidence, she tried to reassure herself. She swiped to the second story. This time, the video was from across the street, zooming in on her bedroom window, the only room with a light in the house. The video was posted 5 minutes ago. Julie's blood ran cold. Trembling, she swiped to the last story. It was a video shot right on her porch, looking through the glass. "He's right here." Immediately, a message popped up on the screen. "Let me in." Julie screamed, throwing her phone onto the bed. She heard the handle on the front door downstairs being turned roughly. She dashed out of the room, locking the door behind her, her hands shaking. She called her father. Her voice was lost in sobs. Her father, who had been enjoying the trip, suddenly became serious, ordering her to call the police and find a place to hide. Soon after, she heard a loud bang, followed by the sound of broken glass. He had entered the house. Julie panicked and ran into her parents' bedroom, remembering that there was a way to the attic. She heard the stranger's heavy footsteps coming up the stairs, and he called out Julian in a creepy voice. She quickly pulled down the attic ladder, climbed up in the dark, and pushed it up with all her might, slamming the door shut as soon as he burst into the room. Julie lay huddled on the dusty attic floor, holding her breath as she listened. He was rummaging around, breaking things. A moment later, she heard police sirens getting closer. The intruder ran away. By the time the police and her parents arrived, the house was in ruins. The police found traces of chloroform on the broken living room window. It was then that Julie remembered the business card she had given to dozens of people at the conference. Her stalker, who knew she lived alone and didn't have a dog, was one of them. Julie deleted her OnlyFans account and all her social media. The money she had made now only brought back horror. She decided to move to another city with her sister. Although the stalker was still at large, her life had changed forever. Julie got in the car with her sister, heading to a new place. She still occasionally startled and looked back, the haunting image of the faceless man in the blue shirt still there, a bitter reminder of the price she paid for her dream. I was 11 years old. It was a Friday night, and I was staying over at my best friend Mark's house. For a kid like me, this was an extremely exciting event. I had been tired from school all week, and I just looked forward to the weekend so I could have fun. My plan was to sleep over at Mark's on Friday night, play all day on Saturday, and then go home in the evening. What was even better was that Mark's parents had an important event to attend and would be home late. They trusted the two of us to look after the house for about 6 hours. I arrived at Mark's house around 8 p.m. His parents were already waiting to give us the necessary instructions. A list of emergency phone numbers, food prepared, and most importantly, to bring Lucky the dog inside before it started to rain, because his kennel in the yard was a bit old and could leak. As soon as his parents left, we started our own party. We watched a few movies, had dinner, and played cards in the living room. Everything was perfect. Suddenly, Mark had an idea. Hey, why don't we go to the abandoned lot down the street? It looks a little creepy. It might be fun. The lot had been abandoned for a long time, overgrown with weeds and trees, surrounded by an old fence. It sounded like a fun adventure. We called Lucky into the house, got the keys, and set off. It was only about a 10-minute walk from home. If we had gone back then, things might have been different. But at 11, we were brave and reckless kids. Let's play a game. Each of us sits in a corner and see who gets scared first. Mark said. We stood facing each other and slowly walked back in different directions until we could only see each other's silhouettes. About 10 minutes passed in silence. Suddenly, I saw Mark stand up and run very fast towards me. He ran as if someone was chasing him. I was about to tease him that he had lost. "Let's go. Hurry up. We have to feed Lucky," Mark said. I was a little confused because his parents had already prepared food for Lucky. But looking at Mark's pale face with fear, I knew something was wrong. We didn't say a word, just ran. Mark held my hand so tightly that my wrist was bruised for days afterwards. When we got home, Mark locked everything. Lucky also seemed uneasy. He kept barking at the door. While we were sitting there, I saw something crawling in the bushes, right behind you. It was coming towards you. I didn't want to scare you, and I didn't want that person to know that I saw him. So I made up a story about feeding Lucky so we could leave. Mark said. After hearing that, I felt a chill down my spine. We didn't dare tell anyone, for fear of being scolded for going out alone. About an hour later, as we were trying to calm down, Lucky started barking furiously downstairs. This time his barking was strange, full of ferocity. There was a man standing in the middle of the yard. He was wearing old, dirty clothes. Even in the dim light, we could see him clearly. He was trying to open the door. The basement door. I forgot to lock the outside door, Mark whispered. Our faces paled. If he had come in through the basement door, there would only be a thin wooden door separating us from him. The noise outside stopped. Then there was the sound of a window being forced open at the back of the house. Then a crazy, creepy laugh rang out from the yard. The strange man began crawling around the yard on all fours, his head tilted back, staring up at the balcony where the two children were standing. The man crawled around the yard like a beast, his laughter never stopping. He threw his head back, his crazy eyes fixed on the balcony. We just stood there, horrified, watching that scene. He kept crawling and laughing like that for about 20-30 minutes, then suddenly stood up, climbed over the fence and disappeared into the darkness. The next morning, Mark's parents came back. They saw the main door handle covered in mud. "Why is the door so dirty? What did you two do?" "We were playing hide and seek. I thought of a trick to make the house really dark, so it would be harder to find," Mark said. His parents looked suspicious, but didn't ask any more questions. We never told the truth. Maybe until now, we still don't understand everything that happened that night. But I know one thing for sure. If he had gotten into the house that night, I probably wouldn't be here today to tell this story.
On a cold winter night, a young journalist named Olivia arrives at Potawatomi Mansion, an old mansion located in the outskirts of Chicago. This house is infamous for its ghost stories that have been passed down through the centuries. People in the area say that the mansion once belonged to the Randolph family, but after a gruesome murder, the entire family disappeared, leaving the house abandoned with restless spirits. It is said that no one dares to come near the house after tales of strange figures and eerie laughter began spreading throughout the region. Olivia had heard these stories and decided to investigate. She brought along a camera and a recorder, hoping to capture any paranormal phenomena to write about for her next article. When she arrived at the large gate of Potawatomi Mansion, the cold and heavy atmosphere made her feel a strange unease. But Olivia was determined to proceed. As Olivia entered the mansion through the large, old door, Everything inside seemed to have been abandoned for years. The walls, faded with age, and the dusty furniture created an eerie atmosphere. The wooden doors creaked in the wind, emphasizing the mansion's silence. The faint light from her camera flashed through the dark. Olivia took a few pictures, starting to jot down notes on the information she had gathered. At that moment, she heard a slight noise from behind. Olivia turned around but saw nothing. A sense of unease rose within her, but she dismissed it and continued exploring deeper into the mansion. After passing through a few empty rooms, Olivia discovered an old book on a wooden table. Inside the book were descriptions of the mansion's history and the Randolph family. She began reading and found that this family had been the victims of a great tragedy. Randolph, the head of the family, killed his wife and daughter in a fit of madness before taking his own life. As Olivia continued to flip through the book, she read more about strange occurrences within the house. Unexplained noises, ghostly figures appearing at night, and sometimes the eerie laughter of spirits who hadn't moved on. It was believed that the mansion was cursed, and anyone who dared enter would become part of the trapped souls. Olivia continued her exploration, but with every step, the atmosphere grew heavier, as if an invisible force was pulling her in. A cold shiver ran down her spine as she realized she was no longer alone in the house. A shadowy figure appeared in her line of sight. A man with hollow eyes and a face filled with hatred. Olivia quickly turned away, but when she looked back, the figure had vanished as if it had never existed. As Olivia moved deeper into the mansion, she entered a small room where she saw a large painting of the Randolph family. In the painting, the man's face was not smiling like in most family portraits. Instead, his eyes stared at Olivia, full of anger and resentment. When Olivia approached the painting, a strong gust of wind blew through the room, causing the painting to shake. Suddenly, a massive dark figure appeared behind her, with glowing red eyes, staring at Olivia. A cold chill ran down her spine. Olivia felt as if she could not breathe. "You're not leaving," a voice echoed chillingly in the air. "You'll stay here forever." Olivia turned around and saw the shadowy figure of Randolph, standing in the middle of the room with a face full of malice. She hurriedly ran toward the door, but all the doors were locked tight. The atmosphere in the house became suffocating, and the darkness seemed to consume every corner. Olivia tried to escape, but every door she attempted was locked. She ran down long hallways, but it felt as though the mansion was changing, the walls closing in on her, trapping her further inside. Finally, Olivia turned around and looked into a mirror in a small room. In the reflection, she saw herself, but when she looked closely, the mirror reflected another image, Randolph standing right behind her. His eyes were glowing red, and his mouth twisted into a sinister smile. Olivia screamed, but no sound escaped. The entire mansion fell silent, as though it had swallowed her whole. No one ever leaves Potawatomi Mansion. And Olivia, she has now become a part of the house, just like all those before her. There was once a small, forgotten town hidden deep in the mountains. In that town stood an ancient shop, old, dusty, and forgotten by time. It was called the Clockmaker's Shop. The sign, hanging crookedly on the door, had long since faded, but it still attracted the most curious of travelers. Few who entered the shop ever left. They say the clocks in that shop didn't just tell time. They controlled it. Lena, an ambitious young woman, had heard whispers about the shop. Desperate for answers, she arrived one evening as the sun dipped below the horizon. The door creaked open, and a bell chimed softly above her head. The shop was empty except for the hundreds of ticking clocks lining the walls. A man appeared from the shadows, a frail, old clockmaker, his face covered in wrinkles, his eyes too bright for someone of his age. "You've come for the answer, haven't you?" he asked, his voice smooth and knowing. Lena nodded, her curiosity outweighing her fear. She had heard the rumors. The clocks didn't just mark time, they bent it. People claimed to have traveled years in a moment. She needed to know more. The old man led her to a small, ornate clock on a table. Its face was cracked, its hands frozen at midnight. This clock, he said, was made with a secret, a curse. You see, every tick of this clock sends a soul through time, but it doesn't come back. Lena stared at the clock, intrigued. What happens when you end it? The old man smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile that hides something darker. Would you like to find out? Despite every instinct telling her to leave, Lena felt a strange pull. I want to know, she said, her voice shaky but determined. The old man nodded, turning the key on the back of the clock. The sound of the winding mechanism filled the room, sharp and eerie. The air around them grew heavier, as though the very fabric of time was beginning to unravel. The clock's hands started to move. With each turn, Lena felt an unsettling sensation, like she was being pulled somewhere far away. She saw flashes of faces, places, distant memories, and something she didn't recognize. A warning, whispered through time itself. And then everything stopped. Lena blinked, but the world had changed. The room was no longer the dim, cluttered shop she had entered. It was pristine, with sunlight streaming through the windows. The clocks on the walls ticked steadily, their faces glowing brightly. She was no longer in the same town. She turned to the clockmaker, who now looked younger. His once frail form had straightened, his face smoother. He smiled. You've done it now, he said, his eyes glinting with something cold. You stepped into a time that doesn't exist. Lena realized what had happened. She had traveled through time, but she hadn't gone to the past or the future. She had entered a parallel world, a world not her own. As the minutes ticked by, Lena began to notice the changes. The people in the streets were unfamiliar, their faces strange. The sky outside was a darker shade of blue, the air thick with an unsettling tension. She tried to leave the shop, but the door wouldn't open. The old man stood in the corner, watching her with a smile that sent a chill down her spine. You see, time isn't something you can just borrow. Once you cross over, you belong to it. Lena's heart raced. She couldn't leave. The more she tried to run, the more the world around her seemed to close in. She was trapped in a time that wasn't hers. Every clock she passed now ticked louder, each second pulling her deeper into the curse. The more she tried to leave, the more the clocks came alive, their hands twisting, their faces distorted. Lena stumbled back into the shop, desperate, her breath ragged. The clockmaker was waiting for her, the same eerie smile on his face. You wanted to know, didn't you? He said, stepping closer. You wanted to see time, feel it bend, but now it owns you. Lena turned to the clock, the one that had started it all. The hands were moving faster now, spinning uncontrollably. She felt herself being pulled toward it, as though the clock itself was hungry, pulling at her very soul. You can never escape, the clockmaker whispered, his voice low, almost loving. Once you've touched time, it touches you back. As Lena reached out to stop the clock, she felt her body grow heavier, her vision blurring. She screamed as the hands of the clock moved faster and faster, until time collapsed around her. The world began to fracture. The walls cracked, the clock shattered. And just before she was consumed by the chaos, she saw her own face, twisted and unfamiliar, staring back at her from the broken clock. The clockmaker's laugh echoed in her ears as the room fell silent. They say Lena's soul is now bound to the clocks in the shop. Every tick, every tock, another piece of her fades away. And so, the curse continues, as new souls wander in, seeking the secrets of time. And once you win the clock, there's no turning back.
I had heard the rumors about the Red Room before. The old house was filled with strange stories, but none more disturbing than the tale of the room that no one dared enter. They said it was haunted, that it carried with it a dreadful curse. The elderly servants were always quick to change the subject whenever it came up, and the housekeeper, Miss Arnold gave me a warning glance whenever I showed interest in it. But I was determined. The challenge of spending the night in the Red Room was too great to resist. It was an old family tradition that only the bravest, the boldest would even consider. So, when I found myself at the Great Mansion one evening, invited by a friend who had recently inherited the property, I made my decision. I was led through the darkened corridors of the old house, its silence so deep that even the smallest sounds echoed eerily through the hallways. The light from the candle I carried flickered with each step I took, casting long shadows on the cracked walls. At last, we came to the door of the Red Room itself. The room was exactly as I had imagined. It was large, sparsely furnished, and, true to its name, completely bathed in red. Red velvet curtains covered the windows, and the wallpaper was a deep crimson shade. The furniture seemed to have been left untouched for years. A heavy wooden chair by the fireplace, and a mirror framed in black. It looked like a room that had been abandoned long ago, its only company the dust and the memories. The key to the room was old and worn, its metal surface dull from years of use. As I stepped over the threshold, a cold chill settled in the air, almost as if the room was breathing, waiting. My heart quickened, but I told myself it was just the atmosphere, nothing more. This was a challenge I had chosen, and I would not back away from it. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Miss Arnold had asked me when I told her of my plan. "The room is strange. You'll feel its presence, and not in a good way." "I'm sure," I replied, holding up my candle. "I have to know for myself." She had merely sighed, looking at me with a mixture of pity and fear. I didn't understand it then, but I would soon enough. I sat in the heavy chair by the fireplace, the room growing colder as I settled in. The candlelight danced erratically, flickering against the shadows that seemed to grow longer by the second. The silence pressed in on me from all sides. Every sound, the smallest creak, the faintest whisper of the wind outside, seemed amplified, like the room itself was alive. I sat for what seemed like hours, my thoughts racing. I tried to tell myself it was just a room, nothing more, but my nerves grew tighter, like a thread ready to snap. The silence was too thick, too suffocating. Suddenly, a strange sensation washed over me, something I couldn't quite place. It wasn't just the darkness closing in or the isolation. It was the weight of the room itself, the feeling that it was watching me, judging me. The shadows in the corners seemed to shift when I wasn't looking directly at them. My heart began to race. I stood up, my legs shaking slightly. I looked around the room, trying to shake off the sense of dread that had settled into my bones. The mirror on the wall caught my attention, its surface dusty and cracked, reflecting nothing but the red haze of the room. That's when I felt it, the change in the air, the shift in the room's atmosphere. It was as though something had shifted within the very walls themselves, as if the room had suddenly become alive with a dark force. I couldn't explain it, but I knew, deep down, that I was not alone. The temperature dropped sharply. I could see my breath now, misting in front of my face. I turned to the door, but the darkness outside seemed impenetrable. The candlelight sputtered violently, and I nearly dropped it in surprise. I felt trapped, the weight of the room pressing in on me from every side. I rushed to the door, my hand shaking as I reached for the handle. But as I turned it, the door didn't budge. I tried again, harder this time, but the door was locked, impossibly so, as if the room itself were holding me captive. I began to panic. My mind raced with thoughts of escape, but my breath grew shallower, my vision clouding with a strange dizziness. I backed away from the door, stumbling toward the mirror. My own reflection seemed distorted, twisted. My face was pale, my eyes wide with terror. The silence returned, only now it felt suffocating. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. The shadows seemed to crawl closer, filling the corners of the room, closing in on me like a living thing. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. It was as if the room was alive, feeding on my fear, my desperation. And then, as if to answer my panic, I saw it, a figure in the mirror standing behind me. A figure that shouldn't have been there. I spun around, but there was no one. I was alone. The room was empty, save for the cold, oppressive air and the deep, ominous silence. I rushed to the door once more, my heart pounding in my chest. This time it opened. I didn't look back as I ran out of that room, out of that cursed house. I fled into the night, not stopping until I was far from that mansion, far from the suffocating presence of the Red Room. I never returned, and to this day, I cannot explain what happened in that room or what presence I felt watching me. But I know this, whatever was there, it wasn't of this world. It was a darkness, ancient and waiting. And it's a darkness I'll never forget. Some books are meant to be read. Others are meant to stay closed. And then there are the books that should never be touched, books that have a history, a power, and a curse that can reach beyond the page. Emily had always loved old libraries. There was something about the smell of aged paper, the quiet, and the rows upon rows of forgotten stories that gave her peace. On a rainy afternoon, she visited a small, centuries-old library that was tucked away on the outskirts of town. The place was almost always empty, with only the occasional librarian shuffling through the aisles. Emily loved that. It felt like she was entering a secret world where no one would bother her, and the books could speak freely to those who listened. That day, she wandered through the aisles of fiction, classics, and history, her fingers tracing the spines of countless books. But one shelf in particular caught her eye, tucked away in a far corner, behind a set of towering shelves. It was a dusty, old row, hidden from view, and it seemed like no one had touched it in years. One book in particular stood out. It had no title on the spine. It was a faded, leather-bound book with a strange, almost unnatural shimmer to its surface. She pulled it from the shelf, wiping off the thick layer of dust, and felt a chill run down her spine as she opened the cover. There were no words, only symbols. Strange, unfamiliar symbols that seemed to shift the longer she stared at them. Emily's curiosity got the better of her, and without thinking, she began to read. At first, nothing happened. She read the symbols, trying to make sense of them, but the more she read, the more the words seemed to blur. The air in the library grew heavier, the quiet hum of the place becoming oppressive. And then it began. A soft whisper, almost too quiet to hear, crept into her mind. It wasn't coming from anyone around her, but it was unmistakable. She looked around, but the library was still empty, the librarian nowhere in sight. The whispering continued, low and insistent, like it was coming from the very pages of the book. You shouldn't have read this. The chill that ran down her spine turned into a cold, suffocating feeling. Emily tried to push it away, but she couldn't shake the sensation. She closed the book, and the whispering stopped. She quickly returned it to the shelf, her heart racing, but the image of the book lingered in her mind. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. The book, the strange symbols, kept playing over and over in her mind. She tried to forget about it, but she couldn't. There was something wrong with that book. She felt it deep within her. The next day, she returned to the library, her curiosity pulling her back. When she arrived, she found the book was gone. It wasn't on the shelf where she had left it. Panic rose in her chest as she searched the rows of books. The librarian was nowhere in sight. She felt a cold draft pass over her and turned around. There, standing at the far end of the library, was a man. He was dressed in old, tattered clothes, his face pale and gaunt. His eyes were wide, unblinking, staring at her with a terrifying intensity. She took a step back, but before she could say anything, he vanished, disappearing into thin air. Emily's heart hammered at her chest. She stumbled backward, her eyes searching the empty space where the man had stood. Whisper grows louder, almost as if coming from the books themselves. The whispering returned. This time, it was louder, clearer. You're not supposed to know. Leave. Leave now. Desperate, Emily rushed to the librarian's desk, hoping to find some answers. The old man behind the desk barely looked up when she approached. "Did you see the man?" Emily asked, her voice trembling. He was right there, standing in the library. The librarian's expression didn't change. He slowly shook his head, almost as if he didn't care. "No one is ever supposed to read that book," he said, his voice low and weary. "It's been here for years, and no one has dared touch it. It brings bad things." Emily's breath caught in her throat. "What do you mean?" "The book, it's a doorway. It calls to certain people, those who are curious, those who have an open mind. Once they open it, the entity that lives within it begins to follow them." She felt the blood drain from her face. "Entity," the librarian nodded slowly. "It's not a person. It's something older, something darker, a being that exists between the worlds. And when it has chosen you, it will never leave." As Emily turned to leave, she heard a creaking noise, like the sound of something heavy dragging along the floor. She spun around, but the library was completely empty. The door was locked, and the lights flickered, casting long, dark shadows across the room. "Leave now, Emily." The voice echoed in her mind, and the room began to shift, the walls growing narrower. The books on the shelves began to move on their own, pages fluttering violently, as if they were alive. The whispers turned into a chorus, rising in intensity. She backed away, but before she could escape, the shadows in the room came to life. A dark figure, a silhouette with hollow eyes, emerged from the far corner. Its form was indistinct, a blur of shifting darkness. It spoke, its voice cold and distorted. "You belong to me now." With a scream, Emily bolted for the door, but the shadows followed, curling around her, pulling her back toward the figure. And just as she reached for the door handle, everything went black. The next day, the library was open as usual, but Emily was gone. The book was back on the shelf, waiting for the next curious soul to open it. The librarian said nothing about what had happened, but the whispers lingered in the air, growing louder with each passing day. Some say Emily never truly left. Her soul is now trapped within the pages of the book, bound by the dark entity that resides within it. And so, if you ever find yourself wandering through an old library and your eyes fall upon a strange book with no title, don't open it. Some stories are meant to stay closed.
Some houses are built from wood, brick, or concrete. Others are built from memories and promises made in blood. This one had 7 rooms, but on the night she turned 28, an 8th appeared. Sarah lived in a Victorian townhouse passed down from her grandmother. Creaky, ancient, but full of character. There were 7 rooms, 1 bedroom, 1 bath, 1 kitchen, 1 attic, 1 basement, 1 sitting room, and 1 locked storage room she was told never to open. On the night of her 28th birthday, Sarah woke up to find a new hallway at the back of the house. At the end of it, a door she had never seen before. It had no handle, only a dark knot hole in the center, faintly pulsing like a heartbeat. Searching the attic, Sarah found a hidden box of her grandmother's belongings. Inside was a leather-bound journal written in looping cursive. Its pages were filled with runes, moon phases, diagrams of the house, overlaid with something that wasn't there. The final pages were smeared in dry blood. One sentence repeated, "Do not open the 8th room until it calls you by name." That night, the door whispered. Sarah, the door opened. Behind the door, a spiral staircase leading downward, deeper than the house should allow. She descended for what felt like hours. The air grew warm, then hot, then wet. The walls pulsed as if they were breathing. Voices began to hum in unison, a low, harmonic chant from no clear direction. At the bottom, she found a perfect replica of her living room, but it was covered in soot and ash. In the center sat a mirror, and in the mirror, not her, but someone wearing her face, smiling too wide. The reflection spoke. "We were promised your skin. You are the last of your blood." Suddenly, invisible hands dragged Sarah into a circle of symbols. Her body began to stretch, limbs pulled in 7 directions. A deep hum shook the room. 7 doors appeared around her. Each door creaked open. Inside, twisted versions of Sarah, broken, altered, screaming. They crawled toward her. She screamed back, but the reflection stepped out of the mirror. It crawled forward, slow, deliberate, and tore its own face off, then wore hers. Sarah's body went limp. Her mind sank beneath the surface. The next morning, neighbors saw Sarah outside, waving politely. She seemed cheerful, calm, but at night, They saw her again, two of her, one walking through the hall, the other inside the mirror, watching. The 8th room had vanished again, but when guests visited, they sometimes heard footsteps behind a wall, in a room that didn't exist. Some claimed they heard their own names whispered. Eventually, the house was sold. The new owners never found anything unusual until one night, their daughter woke them, crying. The lady with the same face as Mommy said, "I'm the next one." When they asked where she saw the woman, she pointed down the hallway to a door with no handle. It wasn't there yesterday, but tonight it's waiting.